Pasta. I didn't know what pasta was till I was about 18. I'm a fifth-generation Australian Scottish descent. We had sausages or chops, mashed potatoes, frozen peas or beans every single night of the week, except for Sunday. Roast lamb. And everyone I knew ate like that. All my neighbours, all my relatives ate like that. I thought everyone in the world ate like that. But when I was about 18, I was introduced to pasta. And Asians have introduced Aussies to rice. I don't think I ate rice till I was in my late teens. And my husband's an Irishman, so every main meal must contain potatoes. And then last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallised acid that's extracted from the sugarcane plant. And that is sugar. Would you agree with me? Aussies, New Zealanders are high carbohydrate consumers. Now what I want to do is I want to take you inside the CBD. Do you remember the CBD? We looked at it briefly last night. The central business district of the human body is the inside workings of the cell. You see, all of these foods break down in the gastrointestinal tract to a singular molecular structure called glucose. And glucose is then absorbed into the blood, and then it becomes part of the body, because the blood is the life of the flesh. Now the blood takes that glucose on the M1 main highway, portal vein, straight to the project manager. That's the liver. Now the liver, as the project manager, is orchestrating what happens to everything that comes into the body. And so the liver, first of all, sends the glucose to the cell. So let's have a look at what happens inside the cell. So the glucose comes inside the cell under the action of insulin. Insulin's basically the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose inside the cell. And then it goes through a 20-step pathway. And that 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. Isn't that why we eat? To get energy so our eyes see, so our ears hear, so our brain works, so our heart beats, so every single cell in the body is running because of the glucose. At the end result of this 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into what's often called the powerhouse. Called the powerhouse because this 8-step pathway gives us a whopping 36 units of energy. Wow, what a difference. Now that pathway there is an oxygen pathway. It uses oxygen. This pathway uses no oxygen. What a difference oxygen makes. By the way, just a little sideline here. How are you going to feel if every single one of your 100 trillion cells has enough oxygen to get to that 8-step pathway? How are you going to feel? We're not going to be able to hold you down. How many people today do you know, when you say, how do you feel, say, oh, all right, not too bad. What's not too bad? Not too good. You know how it is, getting there. How many people, when you say, how are you, say, fantastic? You'd almost say, oh, what's wrong with them? Oxygen is a very powerful thing, it's oxygen. I have to hold myself back here because we're not talking about oxygen right now, we're talking about glucose. But the oxygen explains why so much more energy. So that's the first place that the liver will send the glucose, is down the pathway to give us energy. So number 1, that is where the glucose goes to the cell. But only so much glucose can be fed through the pathway. And so now the liver causes some to be stored in the muscle cell, particularly like a little bunch of grapes, but they're little molecules of glucose, and they're called glycogen. So glycogen is your quick-release glucose stores. So yesterday, I had a light soup at about 4:30, I think. Then I worked hard yesterday evening, lecturing to you. I got to bed about 10. I think I was in bed by 10. Slept in a little bit. My habit is I wake at 5, but 5 here at the moment is, yes. 3 a.m., yes, so it was a bit hard to wake up here. So I usually walk at 6 and eat at 7. This morning I walked at 7 and ate a little bit later. And Amelia and I, we found hills where we were, and we did our high intensity running up the hills and recovery down the hills. Where did I get the energy? I hadn't had breakfast yet. I only ate lightly early yesterday. It's my glycogen stores. They're quick release glucose stores. They're just sitting in the muscle cell waiting to be called on. It's not a good time to exercise after you've eaten, because where's all your body's energy going? Digestion. One lady said, well, how am I going to have the energy to walk? I said, it's your glycogen stores. It is the diabetic's best kept secret. All you need to do is something to access that. And 2 things access it. Demand, which is exercise, and the other is water. Very important to be well hydrated. It helps your body access that. There's still glucose left over on a high carbohydrate diet. High carbohydrate diet means high glucose release. And only so much glycogen can be stored. And this glycogen that is in your muscle can only be used by your muscle. Your liver also stores some glycogen, and that can be used all over the body. That's a good brain backup. So now, what is the liver going to do with the excess glucose? It stores it in the most amazing fuel depot in the human body. You may have heard of it. It's called fat cells. And in Australia and New Zealand today, on the high carbohydrate diet, what is happening to many? They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's the 3rd place that your liver causes the glucose to be stored. The pancreas is the organ that we're going to be talking predominantly about. Here it is. And the pancreas lives under your left rib. And the pancreas releases insulin on demand. And so looking at this equation, high glucose demands high insulin. You see that? And one of the amazing things about these fat cells, they don't need insulin to get in, and they don't need sodium. So when this cell starts to get a little bit weary, because you can imagine high carbohydrate, high glucose, high insulin, and the cell is getting so much insulin, and it's already got its fuel, it's already got the stores, so something called insulin resistance steps in. You've heard of insulin resistance? It's almost as if the cell says, I'm sick of the sight of you. I'm sick of the sight of you. We've already got our fuel. We've already got our glycogen stores. So insulin resistance sets up in the cell. But there's another cell that says, just come right on in. No need for insulin. No need for sodium. Just come right in. Who is that? That's the fat cell. So this cell, it needs insulin and it needs sodium. But this cell, it doesn't need any. So what's happening now is you've got insulin resistance. Insulin can't get that glucose in. The glucose is going round and round. Blood sugar levels remain high. Brain says, more insulin, because the brain thinks, it's not getting in. We must need more insulin. And so what's happening here, we've got a problem. More high glucose, more insulin's released. The cell's saying, you're not coming in here. We've seen enough of you. So what's happening over here? Come on in, just come on in. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually, the pancreas just wears out. And the pancreas just says, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And it becomes depleted, it becomes worn out. Do you know that diabetes mellitus means sweet urine? You see, there's just so much glucose running around, it can't go anywhere, and so what happens is the body starts to urinate it out. Sweet urine, glucose in the urine. And one of the signs of diabetes is huge amounts of water. So the body starts saying, we've got to have more and more and more water, and the person actually starts getting very, very tired because hardly anything's happening in here because of the insulin resistance they're set up. It's a terrible situation. The current figures are 400 diabetics diagnosed every week in Australia. That's alarming, isn't it? There was no diabetes until sugar was well established, because what happens when sugar goes into the body, blood glucose levels rise dramatically. This is not a red pen, is it? Anyway, should be red. Blue blood, royal. Blood glucose levels rise dramatically. So very quickly the brain says, quick pancreas, release insulin. And because there was so much glucose, huge amounts of insulins are released. And now blood glucose levels go down. Because remember what insulin does? It's the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose into the cell, into storage, or over here as storage. And so because there was so much insulin released, blood glucose levels now are going too low. Now we've got another crisis. The cells are now starving because of the drop in fuel. And our brain, it consumes 15 times the fuel of any other cell. So brain starts to fade. This is called hypoglycemia, very low blood sugar. In fact, if it gets too low, the person can pass out. So very quickly the brain says, pancreas, stop the insulin, quick, release glucagon. Now glucagon is the other hormone that the pancreas makes, and it's designed to get the blood sugar level up again. But what does the person usually do down there? Have a lolly, have a biscuit, have a Mars bar, have a Coke, have a quick sweet, yeah? What happens then? Up again. What does the brain go? Oh no, now we're too high. Stop the glucagon, release the insulin. Oh no, now we're too low. Stop the insulin. Can you see what's happening? Up, down, up, down. It's called this biochemical whiplash. Up, down. How does the person feel up there? Spun up like a top. How does the person feel down there? Oh, they're passing out. A man said to me one day, Barbara, he was a diabetic. He said, I had a diabetic crash on the bus today. I said, really? What time? 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, oh, what did you have for lunch? Why am I asking that? Because the last thing he ate is what's going to do it. He cleared his throat. He obviously didn't want to tell me. He said, 2 donuts and a can of Coke. I said, aha. Now I know what caused your crash. It went so high and it was so dangerous, that high, that the body reacted as in a crisis, releasing too much insulin, and where did he go?